Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me here today. If you found yourself here, there may be a message for your healing journey, soul's evolution, transformation, or simply information. Today, I would like to talk about the abuse of a power of attorney. So, if you ever had to sit with somebody while they are in the hospital and maybe they're grieving or have depression, and maybe you have blended families and somebody power of attorney on their mother that you're sitting with. And of course, maybe your father had passed already, and there's a lot of things that were talked about and discussed. And there's wills because it's a blended family. So let me just tell you what can happen and maybe what you can do about it so your family doesn't suffer like mine. So, power of attorney, misconduct, of course, it's when a legal document that allows an attorney or in fact somebody to advocate for their family on their behalf is misused and not followed and or changed behind the scenes. Of course, in my situation, it was literally while she was in the hospital. So that means she eclipsed her sister and her children out, even though her mother wanted, obviously, to take care of them in the event of her death. So, power of attorney misconduct can include anything from financial exploitation, fraud to negligence, right? So, my dad passed, had a will, and of course, with blended families, you just assume things would fall into place because he had it in place for a very long time. And then, of course, other people get sick, or maybe you have somebody that immediately after wasn't taking care of their health because they were caring for somebody else until they passed away. So what happened in my case was 6 months, my stepmother was in the hospital after my father had passed. We didn't address the will immediately after his funeral. It was we were in COVID as well. And I didn't think it was appropriate at the time, but of course you always just think it would happen. And it was discussed, so we didn't think there was a problem digging out what his wishes were. Well, shortly thereafter, she went into the hospital for 6 months, and I was there most of the time. Little did I know she would not be returning home, and she died in the hospital. All behind the scenes, clearing out my father's items, selling top price items, transferring titles to stepmother, which wouldn't need to be because it's hers anyway. She's the only living spouse after my father died, but had a will, right? So these are evil people that capitalize on your pain and suffering, and of course your emotions due to a lot of other things, not even grieving your father because you had a funeral and then stepmom died. Why? That is because I adored her and she loved my dad and he was happy and I was so grateful. And she was a lovely lady and I enjoyed her company. So gave updates to her children back home and grandchildren and I was closest to her. So we were very close. So little did I know, everything of my dad's was pretty much cleared out, and her daughter abused the power of attorney, changing everything she could to capitalize on not only her mother's estate, but mine as well. And we have blended families, so everybody suffers on my end. And then, of course, her own sister fell to her demise and left my stepmom's grandchildren out of the will. Can you imagine the heartache and pain we all suffered? And now, 3 years later, we're finally coming to closure. So, my recommendation is everybody be crystal clear with your wills and make sure you leave to your loved ones. Be very specific. And if you do start a new family or have blended families, have it adjusted at the time of way before marriage to another person and make sure it's specific. Of course, there are laws and rules along the way, but if you are specific, it should supersede any of that. And I recommend, and I know it's difficult, trust me, I know, after the celebration of life, review the will and take care of it within 10 business days. It's imperative so nobody lose track. And of course, then you can move on with your grieving process and your celebration of your loved one and do what's right by your families, which is equally important. Now, why weren't things settled immediately? There's a grieving that happened with my stepmom as well. You see, she was married, divorced to her first husband, and had the children, and then he passed away. So, along the way, I guess, some of the people learned a lot of different mad skills for their evil ways to learn how to fraudulate, if that's a word, fraudulently capitalize on everybody else's pain. Power of attorney is magical, and they can go ahead and alter documents while somebody's compromised. Now, one can say they're compromised when they're under duress in the hospital under medication, yes, but if they pass, which is their hope, then there's nothing that anybody can testify against, just like the sister as well. If you follow what I'm saying, it's an awful thing. So, understanding grieving, you see, my stepmom was grieving my dad, and she also had her past husband die of cancer. And then her first husband was a divorce, but also passed away. So she was definitely grieving and understanding the grieving process. She was in shock and denial. She was in so much pain herself and didn't take care of her own medical health. And so after he passed, she still was resistant. So I made sure she received medical attention, and sure enough, she needed it. So she had pain and guilt. She had some anger, and of course, sadness for her own life because she sacrificed taking care of my dad and didn't take care of herself. She was a good person. She really was. But also, when we talked about different things, I just assumed she would have the say, and she tried, but her daughter didn't listen. So she had some depression, of course. She actually lost a limb, and that was sad, right below the knee. So complete depression. But we talked about a lot of things, and to the end, I just expected that her wishes be, you know, do right by her. But none of that really happened. So the acceptance for things we can't change and the courage and great discernment to know the difference. It's important to know your wishes of your loved one, and you decide what that means and be very specific. But behind the scenes, if somebody has a power of attorney, they can change the will of your person, right? Which is a very, very, very sad thing. You know, they took her purse and had her checking account and everything. They can do everything with it, and they definitely abuse that power. Now, after that was done, I made sure she had a beautiful vase at her grave site, which was next to my dad's, and I make sure it's full of flowers. It's important because she is a beautiful woman, and I promised, and I promised. I make good on my promises, so if I say it, it's good as gold. But that doesn't mean shit when somebody has power of attorney and they're evil. I know that from dealing with a narcissistic person who then collaborates with this said evil person to try and do the same thing to me, right? Taking my dad's inheritance, altering documents. Why? Because she works at the court system, right? She knows somebody notary and pushes the documents through. Go figure, right? One more thing. People learn a lot of things along the way, right? I've been through a few things, you know. I love that quote, and I have. So I'm putting the message out verbally, but YouTube here, even though I'm live, likes to block and, not let me put a message out that will help people heal and learn some bad skills about what to do prior to all of this other stuff harming you. So if you are in grieving stages, I completely understand. There are people that can't grieve. They go from brain space to let's get it figured out, which can be very hurtful. So be tender with each other. Know that it's a celebration of their life, and then do what's right by their will and have it be read. And then honor it. Honor it and don't be greedy. But on the other hand, start your wills, make sure you're specific, and I would update them. I don't know. It depends on who you're with. But if you remarry and if you live in families, it gets tricky. Be specific. And anybody that has a problem with that, maybe you got to wonder why are they in your life in the first place? There's loopholes in the justice system. I also know that. But be specific. It's yours to leave to whoever you feel you need to. And that's all right by anybody. I would say that's level-headed and is a conscious and comes from a heart space, right? So let's be kind to each other and honor the dead, for they want to rest in peace, and we all should move on after we've celebrated their life, no matter what happens. Get to your healing and move back to heart space. It's not about fighting over the items, it's about being fair and doing what's right with the people that pass, so all of us can then live our lives in joy, peace, and harmony without years later fighting over some material thing that in the end, especially in my case, now those items that are ready to be for sale have been tampered, right? So that way, the auction or whatever we're having, there won't be any money anyway. So it's net zero out of zero. And I like my probate attorney, he's a decent guy, but that's one thing you never want to do. Sorry. I know all you guys out there have a purpose. Sometimes it just happens. But if you take care of your affairs prior, then maybe you won't need to go to probate and waste a lot of your money, time, effort, and energy over these type of things because it hijacks your closure on their death. And years later, is it really worth it? Wouldn't you rather take your family somewhere and enjoy a nice meal and laughter and celebration of life and enjoy those special moments versus any of this chaos? It's unnecessary chaotic energy. And evil people are just evil. And what happens to the dead? Well, they're not in peace. They're literally rolling over. And maybe they'll hunt you. I don't know what they want to do on the other side because they're certainly not calm. Trust me, I know. I hear, see, and feel them, and I'm trying to help so they can be in peace. But you can't control evil people. But God has a way of, creating some special karma, and whatever is due to them will certainly happen. Now, here on Earth, you can certainly make things right and build a lot of great karma fast. But if you're evil and keep trying to harm people, it doesn't work. So once your celebration of life happens, make sure you're back to your heart space as soon as you can. And by the way, there's no judging and there's no time frame because everybody grieves differently. And grieving your loved one is important. And however that works for you is equally important. And your whole family will do it differently. And wherever you are is right where you need to be. And I honor that sacred space within you. But try not to live in depression or should have, could have, would have, because we can't change the past, right? If you weren't there at the time it passed, it's okay. Write a letter and go for a walk and talk to them. They can hear you. I mean, if you don't believe in it, trust me, they do. And God has a plan. If you make amends, it's okay. Write a letter and burn it. It is energy, and they do receive it. And maybe they can't do the same for you, but they will receive it and then be able to heal on the other side or wherever they go. And then everybody can live in peace, right? Isn't that the whole point? Rest in peace. I give you my peace. Go in peace. We all need more peace, joy, happiness, and love in this world. Let's create that sacred space now, right? And so it is. Just remember to take care of you because you matter. Namaste.